Make sure that everyone online is also able to see us and participate. Okay, and our screen is shared with our folks online?
Yes.
Great. Can we go to the next slide? And then probably the slide after that. All right, so just a brief history of how we got to where we are today. This journey, and some who have been around North Plains longer than me would tell you that it started much earlier, but for the purposes of today, North Plains started a project in around 2016 to update the city's comprehensive plan. And that started with a year-long process to develop a community vision. Along the way, as part of that process to update the comprehensive plan, the city did a study in 2017, did two studies, one on housing and one on economic development. And that led to the adoption of an updated comprehensive plan in 2017. Based on leading kind of, because of what the housing and the economic studies said, the city started an urban growth boundary expansion project in 2020, and we'll go over some of the details of what those two studies said. In 2022, because we were just getting started and some population forecasts for things had changed, the city updated both those housing and economic studies to use those more up-to-date population forecasts. In 2023, City Council adopted a recommended urban growth boundary expansion. Many of you know that then went on the ballot in 2024, in May of 2024. And because of the results of that vote, in August of 2024, City Council initiated this relook process, which is a community engagement effort to take another look at that urban growth boundary recommendation. Next slide, please. So the relook process, we kind of start with a lot of information and outreach. I mentioned the frequently asked questions document. We also had our first community meeting where we presented a lot of information, and then the whole night was just question and answer and comment from community members. We had a great turnout. And there's also a lot of information that you can find on the project website. I think a link to that is on some of your materials that I'll go over later. But if you just Google North Plains UGB, you'll get right to that page. There is a relook advisory committee made up of a variety of people and interests from North Plains. That group is going to meet a total of 4 times. They've met twice so far. We had a kickoff meeting, and then our second meeting, we had a kickoff meeting, and then we had one of our 3 community meetings, and then a second relook advisory committee meeting. That group's going to meet 2 more times. As I mentioned, we had a first community meeting a few weeks ago. Tonight is our second community meeting, and the third community meeting is going to be on January 9th. We'll show the dates of upcoming meetings towards the end of our evening tonight. Out of this process of advisory committee meetings and community meetings, there's going to be a recommendation that goes forward to City Council for their consideration. That will probably happen sometime in January or February. Although we do have a task in our scope built in where if the relook advisory committee or City Council thinks that more work and more community conversations need to happen, that's something that they'll decide, and we may continue that process. But the plan is to bring a recommendation to City Council in the January, probably February timeline. All right, so that's how we got to where we are today. Let's go a couple slides ahead. Good. Give a little bit of background information. Like I said, we gave a lot more information at the first community meeting, but because tonight's focus is this mapping activity, we'll just go over some of the high points. So I think it's very important to know that cities like North Plains with less than 10,000 people in population are encouraged by the state to plan for growth, but are not required to, and they're not required to accommodate the future growth that they identify. However, because North Plains did this housing study and the City Council adopted this housing study, The city does need to either respond to the housing need that came out of that study or repeal that study. So that's a decision that the city has to make, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through the presentation. So what did those studies say? The housing needs analysis, we'll get to that in a minute, but just see the two studies, the housing needs analysis is how the cities in the state of Oregon determine how many housing units are needed over a 20-year period, and associated with that housing units, how many acres are needed to accommodate those housing units. Likewise, an economic opportunities analysis determines the 20-year land need for economic development, for jobs. And those the EOA, as we call them, and the HNA are based on the 2020 population forecast from Portland State University, and that's per state requirements. That's what you need at this point in time. There is rulemaking happening that will change that, but at this point in time, you need to base, cities need to base their growth on population forecasts from Portland State University. Next slide, please. So the study said there's a need for 1,348 new dwelling units in North Plains over a 20-year time period. And the committee that was working on this worked with the consultant and DLCD and determined that about 70% of those should be single-family detached homes, so about 944 units, and about 30% should be single-family attached, like townhomes, or multifamily, like apartments, and that's about 404 units. Now, a good number of those at the time could be accommodated within the existing urban growth boundary. So we don't have it on this slide, but the number of units that North Plains can't accommodate in its current urban growth boundary is 790 units. And when we translated 790 units at these different types of units, single-family detached, single-family attached, and apartments, that came down to a land need of about 110, 111 acres. The way that the state process works, you also need to identify how much right-of-way you're going to need for roads and utilities, and we calculated that at about 15%, so that's about another 16 and a half acres. And then the city has a parks and recreation plan, excuse me, and a standard for providing parks per a certain number of residents. How many acres of parks do we need per 1,000 residents? And that plan identified another 40 acres for parks. So for housing and parks, we have a total of about 167 acres. That's what that study found. Next slide. And as the advisory committee deliberated and worked on this process, there were a few key considerations that they kept in mind. Number one was that they heard from Planning Commission and City Council a preference for lower density, kind of similar to the current character of North Plains. The second consideration was the challenge of having a lot of higher density residential development housing without an established transit system. Higher density housing sometimes attracts households that don't have vehicles. So a robust transit system is helpful when you have that higher density housing. There was also a recognition that there's a need in North Plains for more a variety of housing types that are affordable to different income levels. North Plains is predominantly single-family detached, and there's a lot of households, especially younger households, that can't afford those single-family detached homes. So there was a recognition that a wider variety of homes would allow more people to afford housing in North Plains. And then also, there's been a long-standing desire for a grocery store in North Plains that would mean that people wouldn't have to drive to Hillsborough to get their grocery needs. I think Bill can speak to this better than I can, but I think especially during COVID, when people were a little bit more around their homes, it would have been much more convenient to be able to meet those daily shopping needs closer to home. And in order to get a grocery store, you need a fair, there's a calculation that the companies do that build grocery stores, and you need a certain number of homes in order for them to build a grocery store. So that was another thing that this committee talked about quite a bit during that time. Next slide, please. And I think this is where I hand it over to Bill to talk a little bit about that economic study and the fiscal situation in North Plains.
Thanks, Steve. Okay, so we get to the really dry stuff, but kind of one of the big things I'm looking forward to hearing from you tonight really kind of has to do with where we're starting here, where I'm starting to talk about here is with employment land. Steve mentioned earlier that North Plains City Council adopted a housing needs analysis, and that land need in it is what we, unless City Council chooses to repeal that and not plan for new housing need, the employment land need that's adopted is the one that's truly up to the community about how much of that identified employment land need we want to add into an urban growth boundary. And so that's kind of a big question mark and a big bit of input we're really hoping to get from you tonight about that, particularly about employment land need for the city. Here are the reasons that we walked through and City Council identified regarding why it's important to add employment land into the city's urban growth boundary. I'll get into the property tax rate in just a moment. If you've been to these different presentations, you've heard some of this before, so bear with me. But you know, we are a leanly funded city with one of the smaller property tax rates in Washington County, and certainly in the region. And what that basically means is that under our property tax system in Oregon, we've been growing rapidly here. We've added a lot of homes, we've added a lot of population, a lot of people have decided they want to live in North Plains, and we think that's a good thing. But the way the property tax system works in Oregon, and given our very small property tax rate, we've had a lot more people come in paying a certain amount of property tax on their home, and they pay it every year. But the amount that our rate generates under our system isn't keeping up with the growth and the service demand from households moving here. So it kind of creates a difficult situation where we have to keep making the same level of employment, the same level of number of police officers that we have. We hire very slowly or modestly, at least far slower than the population growth that we're getting. And so we have to think about how to change that pattern. Talked about the lean service levels. We've looked at how our neighbors are funding and how they are providing services in terms of what they're spending on, how much staffing they put towards different service levels. And it's clear compared to everybody, we're operating very leanly compared to others. And it really kind of boils down to our fiscal situation and our tax base. And the big thing really that we're trying to affect here is that North Plains is rapidly approaching having an 85% residential tax base here, and only about 15% of its tax base is coming from employers, businesses that are paying property taxes and fees. And the reason that's a problem is because you really need to be closer to 50%, the split there, for a city to be able to offer full services and adequate services for the population that it has, without seeing declining service levels or even budget cuts. You're probably going to hear about even more budget cuts at different larger agencies, different larger cities in the next several weeks and months. And that's really kind of because their tax base is not unlike ours. We're just, far more residential. We don't have enough businesses helping to pay for the services that we're trying to deliver or keep up with service levels that we're trying to deliver. So it's a big deal, and it's important to try to balance out your tax base with businesses who are helping to pay into the property tax base and fees, because right now it's overwhelmingly our residents who are paying for the services, and they're not like other cities, at least having more businesses here helping with that. And we're already providing a lean level of services. So we want to try to get out of that and not get into that trap getting any worse for us. Thanks, Steve, or Roland, thank you. And here's just the comparison of property tax rates around compared to our neighbors. North Plains' permanent property tax rate, and the one that everybody pays on their tax bill, the city rate among the other ones. I think a lot of people pay $15, $16 per thousand tax rate on their tax bill, and recently you paid that. But of that $15 or $16 in the tax rate, North Plains only gets about $2.17. Hillsborough School District, Washington County, those agencies get quite a bit more of the property tax check that you pay to the county. We get a pretty small fraction of that as a city because our tax rate's so low. And that's by state law going back to 1996. We have the option, like other cities have taken, to adopt local option levies to kind of help supplement that. These red bars represent portions of property taxes in other cities where those cities have decided we're going to add on to a property tax locally to help supplement funds. Problem with that is you have to renew them every 5 years. You have to do a new one and then potentially renew them every 5 years. And that's something that's kind of hard to permanently fund things on, but it definitely helps. But all things told, we have a far lower property tax rate than our neighbors, and that's a big challenge. And so we tried with a local option levy with public safety a couple of years ago. That didn't pass. Folks weren't super crazy about it. So we kind of have the challenge of reluctance on property taxes going up, as well as, mixed feelings and wanting to ask questions about what does growth have to do with it? How much should we grow? Should we even grow? So that's kind of where we are. So anyway, we went through the process of identifying if we were to target having a 50% balanced tax base in 20 years' time. How much employment land, how much employment investment and business investment would that take to balance us out in 20 years? We kind of went through the math. We looked at North Hillsborough, north of Highway 26, kind of in the area where Reesers is and where Liberty High School is and kind of the different businesses up there. And we thought that's kind of an interesting mix of businesses that could probably locate North Plains one freeway stop away. So we kind of modeled things on that. And what we identified is that in 20 years' time, if we added 688 acres of a variety of industrial and commercial uses, and that developed over a 20-year period, with residential growth in addition, in 20 years' time, we would have a 50-50 tax base. That's where we would be. And so that's the idea behind the 688 acres. We have growth that we're planning for in population growth, but the thing to keep in mind is that right now our tax base is already about 85% residential, so we have this gap to make up for to try to even get to 50%. So that's why the numbers seem or have been talked about as being big, but it's because we're an overwhelmingly bedroom community, and it's going to be a problem more and more in the future, and so we want to have options to get out of that in the future. Is that it?
I think so.
All right, I'll hand it over to you. Thanks.
And so when we look at the residential and the parks and the employment all together, we have a total of about 855 acres. I didn't mention earlier, the reason we have 0 acres for schools, we did talk to the school district and say, and asked based on the projected population growth, if they had enough capacity in schools or if an additional school would, land for schools would be needed, and they indicated to us that they have enough capacity in the existing schools or planned schools. So 855 acres. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk just briefly about the process. I'm not going to go deep into the process, but kind of the results of the urban growth boundary expansion process. The area that you see outlined here in the different colors is the total area that North Plains could potentially expand into. The North Plains is largely surrounded by rural reserves, which are areas that are off limits for urbanization for a 50, now closer to 40-year period. Some cities have urban reserves, areas that are designated for future urbanization growth. North Plains does not have any urban reserves. What North Plains has, what's in these colors, is lands that aren't designated either way. And I'm not one to know all the details of the history there, but a lot of conversations happened in the 2013, 2014 time range. Folks from North Plains, folks from the county, folks from Metro. And that's where this undesignated land was identified. And so we divided the land into these different sub areas to study where, which areas are different priorities for growth. I will mention, and we'll talk about this during our mapping activity, this land south of Highway 26 is what's known, we don't need to get into the details, but it's known as exception land because there's already some urban uses there. And that, by state law, has to come into the urban growth boundary first. Just that area right there. We had ruled out the area to the west where the airstrip is, but that light green there has to come into the urban growth boundary first when North Plains decides to grow. All the rest of the land, all the land north of Highway 26 is treated the same in terms of priorities. But we did an analysis on, according to state law, on these 4 different factors. One of them I'll mention is kind of the ability to serve with public utilities. And what we found was this east area was most ready, most development ready in terms of public services. The north area was second, and to the west was third. That was kind of how they scored in terms of their readiness for expansion. Next slide, please. So the recommendation, yes, sir?
Quick question, the exception land on the previous slide, originally in the first meetings, there was that airstrip land, and that was also in it.
Yes.
So my question is, can exception land, there is no way you're saying for us to remove the exception land?
Correct, and it was because of the airstrip and the fact that the land is already developed at around 2-acre residential lots that we, according to the different exceptions that the state allows, it was determined that that area can't really accommodate the housing need or the employment need because it's already developed at a pretty low residential, low density residential, and you know, you're not going to accommodate much of your new housing adjacent to an airstrip. And so we went through the process with the landowners and with the city to say, yeah, this land should be excluded. It's not really viable or feasible to meet our housing need on this land or to meet our employment need on this land. And that's different than this area to the east that doesn't have that as much of that development or the airstrip, which provides a barrier to putting in infrastructure.
You're saying there's no legal way for the city to remove that from the exception category?
Yes.
Not to my, I'm not an attorney, but to my knowledge, there is not a way to remove that land according to the state process and the state regulations. I'm sure the city could try, but there would be a lot of risk because there's not a straightforward way to do it. Okay, so next slide, please. So here's where the advisory committee and then eventually city council landed, which is that south area that we were just talking about is about 34 acres. That was the first area that was added. Then, as I mentioned, the city went to the east because that was the most development ready and took that entire area, 412 acres. And then to the north, to extend some of the residential development that's happening there and bring in, if you're familiar with the reservoir, the city thought that, excuse me, would be a good location for a park. So more of that area. And then there was more area to the west than that could be brought in. So a portion of the west. So let's go to the next slide. So this purple line is the boundary that was drawn, and you have, for your reference, one map on each table of this proposed boundary. This is the boundary that was adopted by City Council in September 2023. And as I mentioned, it has that area to the south, to the east, not including Recology, and then some of the land to the north and to the west. And when expanding an urban growth boundary, the city's not required to identify specific land uses. It's just the line that's drawn. However, in order to draw that line, it's really important to talk about what types of land uses you think might go where. So the next map, the next slide shows the map of where the committee and city council, this is not final, this is just a map that showed kind of how their conversations went. The blue is employment, either commercial or industrial, and the yellow is residential. So the idea was that, employment here, residential here adjacent to the school and this other residential development. Same as to the north, residential extending from recent development. To the south, potentially some commercial development that's going to capture trips of people coming to and from the highway. And then eventually more employment development to the west. So that was the thought process behind the proposed urban growth boundary. Next slide, please. So what we're going to do tonight what we want you to do is engage in this mapping activity. First, what we have, and I'll go over them in just a moment, is 3 questions that we'd like you to discuss at your table about what you want for the future of North Plains, and hopefully it'll help you. It'll help you with the mapping activity. There's a big square on your maps on your table that says big ideas. We want you to write some of the ideas that come out of your discussion in that big ideas square. And those ideas should help you determine how you want to show growth in the urban growth boundary. There's a couple rules. One is, remember that area, if your table decides that North Plains should see some growth in the next 20 years, that area south of the highway has to come in first. So that has to come in. The second rule is, I mentioned earlier that North Plains can either address the housing need that came out of that housing needs analysis, or else repeal that housing needs analysis. So that means in terms of residential growth and parks, either you add all of the residential land, all the yellow and the green, or none of it, because the city's not able to do both. Go ahead.
What if the city were to repeal the current HNA and to use the current numbers to make a new HNA? That's about half the growth, is that be correct? I mean, just an estimate.
Yeah, I'm not super familiar with the more recent projection, but I thought.
5,500,
Okay.
7,000.
And I did think about that. I think, so there's a lot of things that the city could do going forward in the future. But right now, the decision before the city is either to take the growth that's been laid out or repeal. So either all or none. Yes, the city could repeal and then do another study and then figure out more growth in the future. But in terms of the decision that the city has to make now, and in terms of what city council would like to hear from its residents about the direction they want to see, that's what we're asking for.
Question?
All right.
One question to that question. What, approximately how much would that cost the city and taxpayers to repeal and redo the housing needs analysis?
So we have a couple questions. We'll try to answer a couple questions, but what we want to do is get the activity started so people can start talking, and then we'll come around and answer questions as they come up. Bill, do you have a response to that question?
The last time I checked, the going rate of a new project, new study like that and process is $40,000 to $50,000.
I think he was saying how much would development cost of that much residential, right?
Of the housing needs analysis.
How much would it?
The study itself,
Oh, the study.
yeah, 40 to 50,000.
Yes.
Can you explain why it needs to be all or nothing? Oh, yes.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. So the city of North Plains adopted a housing needs analysis that identified 127 acres needed for housing and 40 acres for parks. Okay? The city has 2 choices at this point in time. They can either, the state requires that when you do a study like that identifies a need for housing, you have to do something about it, right? Like, you have to expand your urban growth boundary if you need to expand the urban growth boundary. But because North Plains is a smaller city, if they choose not to, if North Plains doesn't want to grow, they can repeal that HNA and do no growth, right? At this point in time. As was mentioned, the city could then do another study and identify new numbers and a new growth. And whatever comes out of that study, then the city would have to grow by that number of acres. So I realize it's a little bit confusing, but at this point in time, the city has a choice to make. Either take the numbers from the current housing needs analysis and grow by that and add that number of acres to the urban growth boundary, or repeal that study and at this point in time say no growth. Again, there could be a future study and a future number of acres, but at this point in time, that's the choice that the city has to make. We'll do one more question and then we need to move on.
Thank you. I understand that the city is in terms of politically, that's steps that they need to take to do either to accept or repeal. However, we have this opportunity tonight to look at and input our ideas, which is what the community asks for as well. So even though it may become, and I don't know what the answer would be, if your answer is growth, we have an opportunity to say where and how. If the answer is repeal, we still have the opportunity to put our input in about growth. And,
Yeah.
and so I wanted, and that wasn't really clear. I just want to make sure that that's the case.
Yeah. And, you know, when it comes down to it, it's your table, it's your map. You do it how you want to, you know, how you want to do it. We're just kind of laying out the choices that the city has to make at this point in time. So I'll call them guidelines, but that's what we're asking for. I'll also mention that each table has or each of you received comment forms when you came in. So you can use those also to record your individual thoughts on how the city should grow in the future.
Steve, quick question for you regarding all the folks who are online, how are they going to?
I'm getting to that next. So, just want to see if there's any more slides. Let's just go to the next slide. So the map. So what you have is a packet that looks like this on each table. The blue squares are employment land, the yellow squares are residential land, the green squares are parks. And it represents those numbers that I mentioned. You also have a scissors on your table. You can cut those squares up any way you like and put as many or as few acres on your map as you want. But the goal is for your table to have this conversation and then put down on the map how you think the city should grow and where different uses might go and how much the city should grow. That's the goal of the mapping activity tonight. Next slide, please. All right, in just a minute, I'm gonna go through the questions that we want you to talk about and which are written on your comment form and are also on the table instructions. You all have instructions on the table that I just went over. But for our folks who are participating online, we're gonna drop a survey into the chat that you can do your own, answer these questions yourself and do your own mapping activity online. And that goes for people who aren't here tonight or aren't on the call either. The link is up on the project website. Anyone can take that survey and draw their own map for future growth in North Plains. So that's how people participating online, while everyone in this room is talking and doing their maps, folks online can be working on that survey. And if they want to hang on and listen at the end as we report back and they want to make some comments themselves, that's great. So 3 questions that we have that we'd like for you to discuss as you get started on your mapping tonight. The first is, so complete cities are those where residents can live, work, shop, and play, meeting most of their daily needs. Complete cities are more connected, healthy, and sustainable because they reduce travel distances and encourage walking and biking. So the first question is, what does North Plains need to be more complete? That's a conversation for you at your table. Next slide, please.
We do have a hand online.
I'm gonna keep going right now. The next question, I guess I'll just read the whole thing. Like many states and metro areas across the country, Oregon has a housing crisis. Folks, can we listen till we get, excuse me, just a little distracting. We'll have plenty of time for conversation. The state needs to add about 500,000 units over the next 20 years to meet the demand for housing, and all communities are expected to be part of the solution to this crisis. In North Plains, many people who work in the city cannot afford to live here, and there is a lack of affordable housing for future generations. The 2022 Housing Needs Analysis identifies a need for 167 acres for North Plains to provide a variety of housing types affordable to all household incomes, as well as parks, trails, and open spaces. So the second question for your table is, do you think North Plains should expand its UGB to allow more homes and public spaces? And again, take that question as you will. Third slide, please. Third question, due to North Plains' low tax rate, this is what Bill was talking about, under measures 5 and 50, and an unsustainable tax base, residents will experience a decrease, I think it says, in the level of city services provided over time. To change this trend, North Plains can either bring in land for commercial and industrial development, employment land, that provides economic opportunity, or depend on passing local option levies and or escalating water rates and city fees. So this is just what Bill mentioned previously. So question number 3 is, should North Plains expand its UGB to include more commercial and and industrial development? And if so, how many acres should be added? And some of you might apply that to the residential question as well if you see fit. So I think we'll maybe answer our online, well, can we just do that? Can we do that in a chat or something, or?
We do not have chat
Okay.
because of the Zoom settings.
All right, we'll take one question and we'll get started.
Dean, do you want to unmute yourself?
Yeah, quick question. Thanks for that summary. You covered a lot of material in a short time. Just my request is that the speakers identify themselves. So the person who's doing most of the speaking, I don't know who you are.
Yeah.
That'd be helpful. Thanks.
Great point, thanks. So my name is Steve Faust with 3J Consulting, and I've been working with the city since 2016 on this process. And the speaker earlier was Bill Reed, who is the North Plains City Manager. All right, with that, let's get started. If someone could turn up the lights, let's get started in your conversations. Again, you have table instructions with those 3 questions. And if you have questions at your table, raise your hand and we'll walk over and answer. Oh.
Okay.
It has city council meetings. No, that's fine, but what do we do?
Okay, for the people who are online, hopefully you guys can hear me over the chatter. We have chat disabled due to city council procedures, but because you're online, I think you're familiar enough with our website to navigate to the planning page.
We could put the city
And we
website.
will share a page where you can find a link to the interactive survey activity. So you'll see on, we will share our screen shortly with the.
That's just part of that activity and let me, so it's.
I mean, it's more number 2.
Right, so let's go over the first one. Let's step over here so we're not by the speaker. So.
Whoever was giving us instructions for online, that was very difficult to hear. I don't know what they said.
You got it going on. I'm thinking about long arm. The long arm of the city is an action. I just don't see it. We're sharing our screen.
It's all
And actually, in
Yes.
Guys, I need to look at time. So we'll probably go to 7.
You know, I have a if there ever is a hour. It's not gonna be a mosquito net. And it's like, then you have to, you know, so then every time you're doing it, you're like, okay, now there's, you know. Exactly, so I was like, there's something gonna go. The more you think you're gonna mess with, you can keep, exactly. So, and that was like, yeah.
I already thought of when I told Carol in that chat, and like, yeah, because I saw her. I guess yeah. It's just the way.
No, I didn't think you, I saw that.
Sorry.
Yes, I guess. Yeah, it's used to.
Cool. Well, thanks for being here.
Yeah, I.
No, well, we might have to, I used to replace this guy. Yeah, does it make plan? I helped the 5 cities up there figure out their reserves. So Forest Grove, Cornelius, all tuned up. Decided to figure out how much land we needed. We needed was 20 and 50. That was my task. Let's give them different goals. Kind of figure out what. So it's kind of fun to see how we're
Can we pull up the sub areas map so people can see how many?
I would think so.
Like, where's it coming from?
There we go.
Right, I guess that's a good nuance. So, I want to answer your question respectfully. The state has a system where the first priority to be exact is to earn reserves. North Place doesn't have any reserves. And then the section that will
How's it going?
zone designation that for rural residential and rural
Start by table 8 when you're done. I have a quick question.
Okay. Let's bring top to the one thing that I will say is the line that we excluded, I believe is tied to the deeds to the airstrip. So the parcels outside of the area. Tied to the airstrip. I would say roughly that might just last times about. So in terms of the state's priority system, I would say that exception needs to be brought in first. Some folks say their understanding is that it just needs to be looked at. And I'm trying to include the nuances of those two things. My understanding is look at it first, without making the need to be done, and that's it, to provide
Yeah, there has been. Like back in the whole life, they said they don't want to buy that's what we're saying.
I think that's sharing now.
And that's why they were able to. It's because they were able to say, we don't want to buy this We're saying that we are working on it. If it's residential, it's separated. If it's industrial, it's actually.
I mean, you literally get to walk in the first.
Yeah, you've got, yeah, this team has got it all.
Somebody put some questions out there.
I know. Sure, you can reveal allocation to a new study. Yes. Oh, yeah. Yes, yes. Maybe you should take that Brian.
Yeah, I don't know what the right answer is.
Yeah. Yeah. And the highlight is. Tax lots are. That's like, so basically, look at a tax lot. Housing, cars, going that sort of stuff. And so that's kind of drawing the boundary that. Yes. Into the road reserve. That's another question I just got. Why is that? It's like, for some reason, that's what's reserved. I don't know why it's got a gas station on it, but it's a. Yeah. That makes so, sorry about that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That's like mid-January, right?
Yeah.
That'll be after. So January 9th is like last week, alternatives, people are driving. I like that, I don't like that. So we'll have that information. We'll have almost all the things that relate what the tax. So that'll be good.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
We have about 20 minutes left, about 20 minutes, so it'd be good to start putting your acres on the paper, 20 minutes.
I can't hear anything.
Mom?
Just a minute, I'm trying to unmute the city of North Plains.
But, can you give my dog can you give Autumn and Fix a hug for me?
We cannot hear.
All right. Everyone please take a seat. Is it all pasted? All right, which table wants to report first? If everyone can quiet down. If everybody can quiet down, we're gonna do our reports now. All right, folks, if everyone can take your seats, please. Everyone take your seats, please. Is there a table that wants to go first? Is there a table that wants to go first? Looking around the room, I'm just gonna pick a table if we don't. All right, quiet everybody, please. Let's hear from your neighbors about what they did with their map.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, let's go up to the front. Oh. Right in front of the table, right here.
All right, so we talked at the beginning about what was important to us in North Plains, what kind of community we wanted to see. And we agreed that we all were in favor of some kind of growth for the tax benefit and balancing the city service needs, and then also creating more commercial opportunity for things to do. Yeah.
Can everybody quiet down, please? Please, thank you.
Thanks. And so we land on this theme of smart growth. And what we thought smart growth really meant to us was by expanding the areas where we already had some development. So we thought residential just north of Bryn Hill made a lot of sense to meet our residential need. And then over here around the school, again, where residential already is, just expanding uses that are already there. We have to meet these 34 acres of already established reserves. And then we thought expanding southward around the area of the school made sense for employment land. Is there anything else you want to add from over it?
The parks?
Yeah, the parks centered around this residential area here.
All right, great, thank you. You want to help take this one back? All right, is there another table that wants to go next? Or maybe I'll just, oh, let's go over here. That was table number, what, 4. And here we have table number 1.
So, we had, 2 more people that had to leave, and so 4 of the people at our table wanted no more growth. We wanted to keep our city boundaries as they are, and, she wanted, a lot of growth. She wanted, she wanted 400 acres over on Jackson School for industry, right? And should I be honest about what you want or not? So he's a property owner and he wanted some land included that's not even on the boundary right now. So we kept shooting him down. So I thought it was interesting when we were talking that if you notice the hashed out mark that goes through town, that's like a wetlands. I don't know if anybody observed that before, that shouldn't have been built on, but is. And Recology apparently is in that kind of land as well. I just thought it was interesting. So,
great, thank you very much. All right, does somebody want to go next, or should I just walk up to another table?
So
this is table number 8 here.
So we have 8 people at our table. Oh, okay. Yes, we have 8 folks at our table.
Quiet, please.
And we pretty much unanimously voted not at this time to do any growth, except for to look at this existing 34 acres for commercial. So that is the area where you get off of 26 and head into Forest Grove or Hillsborough and whatnot. So most of us were uncomfortable at this point in time to roll out with any growth until the new folks get into position after January 6th. So I think we're just growing comfortable with where things had gone to this point and wanted to wait. And it kind of felt like some of it was an all or nothing. We felt a lot of people moved into the town because they like the way the town is now. So that's where we were coming from. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. All right, who's next? Are you guys ready, or should we go to, yeah? Who wants to be the speaker?
Steve.
Ours is a little bit quickly flew together there at the end because we had a lot of discussion, a lot of differing opinions here. We do believe we still need a lot more residential area, but we think adding more commercial area down to the bottom. So I think we were mostly all in agreement that we need some growth still. And we unanimously, I think, if I am correct, we don't think we want or need to add this section here. It's a little bit nangling of the rules there on whether it's, you have to add or you just have to look. There's some questions on that, so I think we unanimously agree, we don't want that. But yeah, mostly, I think it's best to, some expansion here, including the old Lakeview Farms as a maybe fairground park area there, and residential increase, and then more of the commercial down here and with increase in residential.
Within the boundary.
Within the boundary, yeah, right.
Okay. Thank you very much. That was table number 3. Who's next? You want to go back? Oh, we'll get to you. I guess these guys want to go first. Let's bring the map all the way up to the front, or do we need to?
We don't have a lot, oh, sorry. Usually I was allowed in general. Okay, so you can see we don't have a lot on our map. Part of it was because the rule number 2 about the south side, we all agreed that number 2, if sorry, I'm drawing a blank here. It basically, if that's a rule that has to be, pulled in first, then we didn't agree with any expansion. I personally live there, so I'm really invested in it. And for those of you in the community who have not driven down 316, I would encourage you, you may not realize there's just homes there. We're not interested in being industrial. I'm pretty sure most of my neighbors feel the same. But we do live right by the seed mill, which has always been zoned industrial. It's been there since the 20 years I've lived there. I don't think any of us have a problem with that remaining that way. But we don't feel that our home should change and become industrial. And especially the rule, about this airstrip here. One of my neighbors right here, they are right on the airstrip, but they're not excluded. I don't know why. I mean, these houses over here, this house, this property right here originally was not excluded and somehow it changed. So, another interesting thing is the water line for the, North Plains runs down 316. That might be a big reason why North Plains, wants to have that part of the highway. That part of for urban growth, that would give the seed mill access to water instead of being on well. So anyways, I'm obviously really opinionated about it. And thankfully, most of the people at my table. The one big thing that we all agreed on is, this property that off Glencoe that North Plains acquired. We all agree that that needs to be finished and something needs to happen with that property. And basically, focus on the parcels that are still open, that are commercial or industrial, and we don't really feel like there needs to be any more growth. I hope I spoke.
Thank you. I just want to say real quick, I did a bad job of explaining earlier, but that exclusion area around the airport, those are all the parcels that are tied by deed to the airstrip, and that's why those are included. So but thank you for that. Who's talking?
Hello, I'm Don Bender. lived here for the last 15 years, lived here up on the mountain, born and raised up there all my life. I don't want none of this. Not one of it. This here, why do we gotta accept that? If we do, if we absolutely are bound and held to it, okay. If we're not, forget it. Okay, we decided, let's do some business. If we absolutely have to, if we do, okay. I'll be honest, I have trust issues. This right here. That's a liability. That's water. We have to have insurance on that. We put that in the city. Is it stable? You have to treat it. Okay? We can think about that later. If we have to put a park in, let's put one in here. After that property's no good anyways, floodplain. Can't do nothing. Hillsboro's coming right here. They come here. Okay, that's the future. If we have to do anything, let's put a few businesses here. Okay, let's bring in a store. Okay, something like that maybe. Okay. I don't want no more growth. I don't want no more homes. Period. Actually, no, I do have something else. There's a reason they built all this out here. Okay, they ran that leg out. Okay, maybe they do something with Hillsboro's coming up in the future. Okay, but you look at this, why is the city shaped like this? Why don't you take these houses here? First off, too damn close. Take that. Why did they put it here? I think we were set up for failure. I think we were set up to continue to have to grow. If you build, they'll come. You know, this was Mayberry back in the day. Now we got North Hillsboro coming. I'm done.
Thank you. That was table 6, and now we have table 5.
So I want to first start off saying that we had a very diverse group of opinions and desires at the table, which I think is great to kind of bring in all those points of view and try to find some compromise that we looked at a little bit here. And but some of the key things we noted were that having the commercial businesses and industry makes sense for the community, that it's actually employing people and that they are and that people are able to utilize those services. They're serving people rather than large concrete structures or data centers or those kinds of things. So a couple of key things sort of noted that, you know, we have this area of North Plains that's really disconnected from this. How do we connect them? And if that's where housing needed, if we need to put in housing, it would be a place to kind of pull that in and connect them, but also provide some amenities and services, since our downtown area couldn't do that. When we talked about livability, we talked about groceries, small hardware stores, places where we could, I don't know, have more vibrant downtown, just more of ways to connect people within the community. And same with kind of going this way, looking at that park, we didn't bring in the factor in the insurance issue. But one key thing we did talk about was if we have to bring this in, keeping it into that commercial industrial as well as here, because one of the things that we could pick up was the Hillsboro dollars coming right here, but not necessarily going up and into North Plains as a way to help support our tax base. But I want to open it up and say, anybody at the table, was there something I missed? Oh, I have one thing to say. I've been here 7 years in February, but we have families that have been here since 1896 at our table. So, you know, we want to try to figure out how do we bring all of that to this discussion. And I really appreciate having an opportunity to come here and talk about it tonight. So anybody have anything else to add from our group?
Well, I just want to say, this whole thing, if we could do the grocery store here.
Oh.
We could do the grocery store here off of Jackson School Road. We are going to bring in Hillsboro residents that any grocery store owner would be interested in putting a store if we don't have the population to support it.
One more.
Sorry. My name is Dave Van Ash. I'm the guy that's been here since 1896. And as I explained to my group, my family owns 1,000 acres between here and Cornelius and Forest Grove and Banks and Hillsborough. And it's threatened every day, and it's getting worse. And I don't want the $600,000 an acre that they're paying for this land in Hillsborough. It would just be a problem for my family. We farmed here for generations. I've been to lots of places in the world. This is one of the most unique places in the world to farm because it's an intercoastal, mild climate, 40 inches of rainfall, 2 or 3 months in the summer to harvest grass seed, clover seed, wheat. It's one of the major seed growing regions in the world. And we also grow hazelnuts. So we got 2 food crops, hazelnuts and wheat. But there are 5 cities surrounding my 1,000-acre farm: Hillsborough, Cornelius, Forest Grove, Banks, and North Plains. And every one of them wants to expand just a little bit. And I've heard this since I was 30 years old when I got involved in land use planning through Oregon Farm Bureau and Thousand Friends of Oregon. And I used to think Thousand Friends of Oregon, that's kind of a socialist organization. And now I'm a member, been that way for 45 years, I guess. They've protected me in several cases. But anyway, I just want you to know that this whole discussion is a lot bigger than the city of North Plains. And we're getting to the point where we've reached maximum capacity of a region, where you can only stuff so many people in there and still protect agriculture and forestry.
All right. I think we've got to all of our tables, but I want to hear from anyone online who wants to provide a comment about their maps. Do we have any hands raised? Anybody want to share what they mapped online? If there isn't anyone, let's go to the end of the presentation and then we'll wrap up here. Thanks to Violet for taking notes while you all were talking. Hopefully you recorded your ideas on the maps themselves, but we tried to capture as much as we could of what you said as well. And I just want to let you know what's coming up next. So here we are today at community meeting number 2. We're going to take all this information that you've given us, your individual comment forms, which you should drop off at the back table, or if you leave them on the table, we'll grab them, the maps, and everyone we heard from online. We're going to bring that information to the RELOOK Advisory Committee. Their next meeting is next Thursday in this very same room. It's open to the public if you want to come and listen to those deliberations and make public comment. But they are going to together identify some alternatives. That could go anywhere from zero growth to the 2023 proposed expansion and some in between. On January 9th, we'll have another public meeting, an open house where people can come in and say, I like this one, I don't like that one, I like whatever people want about those different alternatives. Again, can say no growth, some growth, a lot of growth, whatever people want. That's on January 9th. And then we haven't set the date yet, but the advisory committee will hear all that information and make some sort of recommendation to city council. In addition to that recommendation, we're also going to give city council all the information that we've collected all the way through. So all that to say, we really appreciate you taking the time out of your Thursday evening to be here and have these conversations. These are really important and difficult conversations that communities face, and I think our last speaker really exemplified that. So thanks for taking the time. I hope you stay involved as we move forward and make sure your voice is heard as these important decisions are made by this community. Anything else to share? All right, thanks everybody. Have a great night.
There we go. Yeah, there we go. All right, we'll see.